For Cybercrime Radio, I'm Heather Engel. Joining me today is Jocelyn King, founder and CEO of Smarter Online Safety. Jocelyn, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Heather. Hi, everyone. So great to be here with you.
I'd like to start by asking you just to tell us a little bit about your background. You're known today as the Queen of Online Safety. You're ranked as a top 10 women in cybersecurity. How did you get here?
Well, I did not get here through a typical route. I did not volunteer to join in to cybersecurity. I was actually a woman in tech. I was working in Silicon Valley. Had been in a couple of startups, and I'd been an executive at Intel. And I got targeted by cyber criminals. And they not only hacked my network, but they were then able to have access to my home security system and everything as a member of the family. And that meant they were undetected. And like so many people, I thought I had done a lot of the right things. And I had done a lot of the right things, but I learned the hard way that there's the saying in cybersecurity, the bad guys only have to be right once. Think of your house. I always like to give the analogy of a house. You're locking up your house to go on vacation or to work, and you're locking, it's like locking, your front door and closing and locking all your windows and leaving your back door unlocked and your garage door wide open. And most people do that online every day, all the time without realizing it. Because as I like to say, we have smart people. We're all smart people, but we can't protect what we can't see. And so I learned the hard way to figure out what is my digital equivalent of my house, and what do I need to lock up. So they not only got into my network, but because they had access to my security system, they were able to disable the security system, turn off the cameras, and unlock the deadbolts and come into our house and plant surveillance in our home, including our bedroom.
Wow.
And this went undetected for at least a year, possibly longer. To this day, I don't know how long that had been in or when it happened. The way we found the surveillance device was that we had had a leak in our roof, and we had attic repairmen fixing the insulation and everything. And while they were replacing the insulation, I'm in my bedroom, I'm looking up at the ceiling, and this wire thing is coming down. It looked like a technical, like a robot spider coming down. Went, what is that? And then it just whoosh, vanished. And I went running out because they had vacuumed up the insulation and debris. And we found a surveillance microphone that had been embedded in the ceiling above my bed for God knows how long. And I did what everybody does in that after panic. I mean, I can't tell you that knot in my stomach, and I thought I was going to pass out because I wasn't breathing. You just have such a physical response to finding out you've been violated like that. And if the fight or flight kicked in. So I did what everybody does. I call the police. But because there wasn't, a picked lock or a broken down door or a broken window, they couldn't help me. And so then I did finally get a hold of an FBI field agent. And as I start describing the device to him, he finishes by describing it to me. And he said, well, unfortunately, ma'am, these are so common. They can be purchased on hundreds of websites. And then my losses, I ended up losing $500,000. This was a 2-year ordeal that we had gone through. And then because of all the stress of it, my husband had had a series of heart attacks and a quadruple bypass and just had a complete personality change and PTSD. And so my 20-year marriage imploded. My own health was suffering. I was on Ambien and antidepressants. When you don't feel safe in your own home and you don't know who's watching you or listening to you or when and why, and you don't feel safe, it takes a toll on your emotional and physical health. And that happened to me. And I was afraid I was going to lose my job because I was going to work, but there was actually a promotion I could have gotten, but I couldn't throw my hat in the ring. And so it affected every single area of my life. And I really could not believe that I would ever recover. But I did. And it was through the help of great cybersecurity people that I just started reaching out to, and one after another. And some of them, protect our nuclear submarine codes and protect large companies that are, like Fortune 10 companies and U.S. banks and Wall Street and the trading floor. And they fight cyber criminals all the time. And they were helping me learn how to protect myself, but it's very difficult for highly trained cybersecurity people to explain in plain English to more lay people what they need to do. And so I did the best I could, but then they invited me to join a startup with them, which I did. And it got named a top 10 cyber startup. I got named a top 10 woman in cybersecurity, and I got to be on the dark web and learning the business of cybercrime, which, as your own website and everything points out, is a $10.5 trillion economy.
Hmm.
I mean, think about it. If it were a country, it would be the world's third largest country after only the US and China. It's that big. And so I got to learn about cybercrime rings. I got to learn that have CEOs and HR departments. I got to learn about nation state attacks. I got to learn about individual hackers. I got to learn about political hacktivists and be on the dark web and see how your information and mine is sold for pennies on the dark web, like garage sale items on eBay. And I was just, it infuriated me. And I said, this should not be happening. This is not okay. I was looking everywhere for a checklist of how to protect myself, and it didn't exist. I said, I'm a smart woman. Give me a checklist. I'll get it done. And I couldn't find it. I found some helpful information here and there about a lot of places about individual ingredients of an online
Yeah.
safety program.
Yeah.
But what can a layperson do? And nobody should have to become a cybersecurity expert to protect themselves and their family and their money. So that became my mission. And I started creating this checklist. And I did. I got it. There's 22 things that everyone needs to check and know. And you're probably doing half of them or more. But as I said, the bad guys only need to be right once. They only need one way in. And if there's something that you're leaving your garage door wide open without knowing it, your whole life could be decimated. And I don't want anybody to go through anything close to what I went through. And so that's my mission now, and that's why I founded Smarter Online Safety. That's why I wrote my book, Digital Self-Defense in an AI World, because of all of this. And I'm wanting to just help people learn how to protect themselves online the same way they protect themselves by locking their doors and windows in their home.
One thing that I hear a lot from my clients, and I want to ask you this question, is many of them still believe in security by obscurity. In other words, we're a small business, nobody cares about us. Were you a target in this case because of maybe what you did for a living? Or was this just happenstance? Someone uncovered one little flaw in your, personal cybersecurity and then exploited that?
Great question. I was not targeted. You would think I would be targeted because of what I did, because at the time
Yeah.
I was working at Intel, and I had actually come in through an acquisition of a company that was a competitor to NVIDIA, and we did machine learning and AI enablement. And so I got to see what was coming with AI, 10 years before the ChatGPT launch. And so I did have that kind of exposure, but it wasn't because of it had nothing to do with that, because they weren't trying to use me for some kind of espionage for information on
Mhm.
things like that. It really was just being targeted for my assets. And it became very clear that I was just a sitting duck because of how I was exposed. And everybody is, if they haven't really secured themselves in these 22 areas, and you're a sitting duck without knowing it. What I would say about the obscurity is back when hackers actually had to work to target you, that may have been the case, because if there's somebody who has more assets than you, more money in bank accounts. But, the way with AI and just with automation in general, hackers aren't even targeting you. They're just running scripts, and you've got AI bots coming out now, and you've got their AI agents are writing more AI, creating more AI agents. So it doesn't cost them anything. And they can now, instead of having 10,000 attacks at once running, they could have 1 million attacks running. So it's kind of like being on the beach at a tsunami warning. If you
Yeah.
stay there, you're not going to do well. But if you get to higher ground, you can. And that's why I'm on this mission to share the message. Just get to higher ground. You wouldn't let your kids stand out in the middle of a busy street with oncoming traffic, and you wouldn't stand out there with them. But that's what everybody's doing in an AI cybercrime world without realizing it. But you can get out of that busy street. You do not have to become a casualty.
How does having been a victim yourself, now you worked in the field, as we would say, so you felt like you were fairly well educated on cybersecurity. You thought you were doing all the right things. How does having been a victim change the way that you teach digital self defense to, say, a layperson?
Well, and one thing I should correct, I worked in tech, but not cybersecurity. I got into
Oh, okay.
cybersecurity because I was targeted. So I was
Yeah.
in, and I want to make that distinction because it's really important. I have a lot of IT people come to my workshops, and
Yeah.
they learn things about cybersecurity that they've never heard before. And they're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. and they're responsible for cybersecurity, and they don't know this. And so there's cybersecurity is such a specialization. It's kind of like the difference between, an endocrinologist and a general practitioner, or a brain
Hmm.
surgeon, and general practitioner. Just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you're a specialist in that. Or, you could be a divorce lawyer, but that's different than contract law. And I want to call that out because everybody understands those differences. But just because you work in tech or even work in IT does not have a direct, correlation to having an understanding of cybersecurity. In fact, one of the challenges I work with a lot of small businesses. They work with small IT companies that say they handle cybersecurity, but when I actually look at what they're offering, it's not very robust. And
Hmm.
because they are not saying we're adhering to this standard methodology or this internationally or domestically recognized standard, it's a lot of claims about what they're doing. And again, they could be doing some cybersecurity, but not enough, and leaving you exposed without you knowing it. I've talked to IT, small IT company leaders who, when we talk about it, I'll bring up a couple of things. I say, well, do you cover this? Do you cover that? And they say, oh, no. And then they realize they have to go audit themselves in a more robust way.
Yeah.
And that's for themselves and all of their clients. So I think that's one of the reasons why cybercrime is a $10.5 trillion economy. It's not just because hackers are so crazy smart or have such enormous superpowers. It's like turning porch pirates and petty criminals loose in a neighborhood where people have not locked their doors and windows, and they've left for the day and left things open. What if we change that? I fundamentally believe we can change the impact of cybercrime.
Mhm. And I think it's an important distinction that you make between people that work in IT and people that work in cybersecurity. And even among cybersecurity professionals, I think there's a big distinction between someone who understands AI security versus network security versus software development security.
Very much so. Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And then, and even personal protection. There's certain things about, like, some of the most brilliant minds in cybersecurity, when their family is sitting around the Thanksgiving table and asking them for advice, they're missing some of the basic stuff. I mean, the thing that was part of my outrage, and what I'm so happy to share with people, is like, so much of the protections you need, you already have. They're just not turned on. You've got settings in your phone and your computer that you can turn on and heighten your security, and nobody knows they're there. It reminds me so much of The Wizard of Oz, with, at the very end, she already had the ruby slippers. She just needed to click her heels together, and she'd be, oh, we're all in that boat. We're all in that boat. We
Yeah.
have these
You have the
superpowers.
tools.
Yeah, and they're not turned on. It would be like having deadbolts in a security system and leaving your door open. We've got them, but we're not using them. And that's why I said this is really a self-empowerment. What I tell people I do, I empower, educate, and equip people to protect themselves online, because we have been looking for other people to protect us. And A, there's not enough of them. And B, there's a lot you can do for yourself. You do not need people to come and lock your doors and windows at night for you to stay safe in your home. You don't have to have them help you online either, but you need to learn how to do it. And once everybody learns how to do it, we're going to be a lot safer.
You recently on your podcast broke down the FBI's 2026 Internet Crime Report and highlighted the 21 billion lost to online scams last year. What would you say are the scams that are catching people off guard the most? What are the most unexpected things from that report?
Well, we've really had an uptick in everything AI powered, which is probably not a surprise that most people hit. Even when I was at RSA just a few months ago, for the first time, all five of the top cyber threats are all AI based. So we've really hit that threshold. So the number one, the biggest thing is that's coming, that is so hard for people to comprehend, is the AI deepfakes. I do talk to people almost every day who have had a deepfake from their grandchild or from their CEO or from some, I mean, and it really is true. It is so common now, and it does not take, it's so easy to create these deepfakes. I have I was an early adopter of some of the technology to create my own AI of myself and my own AI clone, and that was with a little more sophisticated version of it. But you can get these free and low cost tools today and do a very decent job, particularly if you just give it a few seconds of video in your voice. It'll have your mannerisms, your facial expressions down, and there's the famous cases of the the gentleman in Hong Kong who was on a Zoom call with 5 colleagues,
Yeah.
and one of them being the CFO, and I know I'm sure most of your listeners, well, probably half your listeners are familiar with it, but, he literally wired $25 million because the CFO told him to, and all 5 of those participants in the Zoom call that he met with every week. I mean, that's the thing, that he met with every week. They were all AI deepfakes and AI clones, and he wired 25 million that was irretrievable. That story was the sensational headline, but what really gets me is he met with them every week and he couldn't recognize them on a Zoom call, not like a quick 10-second video message, sent over. That level of sophistication, it means that we cannot trust our eyes and ears the way we thought we could, and that is the biggest shock, I have to say. So that one's the big deal one where we're having to change our way of thinking, right? And then some of the others are definitely, frankly, one of the things is the small things. What's really happening on scams, you see, the Facebook ads and other ads where somebody you trust, like a Shark Tank shark or someone is telling you this is a great investment and get into it.
Yeah.
And people are, and I it was heartbreaking. I spoke to a woman and her husband. One of these sharks they admired. They invested, and they were smart. I mean, she was a retired school teacher, and he was a retired police officer. These are smart people who understand, and he understands crime and scams. But they invested $5,000. They said, okay, well, we're just going to do a little bit, but they made like $1,000 return, 20% or 15% in like 6 weeks. And they said, wow, that's great. And of course, the scammer on the other side said, well, you need to, you can take your money out, you can do, oh, and by the way, there's this other new investment thing that's coming up. I'm not really supposed to tell other people about it, but I've really enjoyed working with you. So again, trust. Again, hey, I'm going to give you an inside tip, and this is all through the trust of the Shark Tank shark that they like. So they put more money in, and then that one pays off. And so then, it only takes a few steps before you've invested 80 to 90%. They put
Yeah.
90% of their entire life savings for their retirement that they were living off the interest of into this. And that's when they found out they had wired all this money overseas and were never getting it back. And law enforcement couldn't help them. FBI and CIA can't help them because there's no jurisdiction for what happened. And then what happens, they're looking for help. So they do find somebody because they get an ad pop up about people who help you recover your money. So they hire this person because they've got some money left, right? They hire this person to help them. That was the same cybercrime ring coming back for the last pass.
Mhm.
And it's those types of things that people have to be aware of, because once you're aware of them, you'll be much more cautious. But those are the types of scams. So financial scams and investing scams are up. They're even up higher than romance scams are up. Romance scams of elderly are up. More retired people over 60 are continuing to get scammed, and those are bigger payouts. So one of the things the FBI just released is the average cost of a cybercrime loss is $20,699. But if you're 60 or over, it's closer to 80 to 100,000 average.
Yeah.
Because there are more people in their 20s and 30s who are hacked, but they lose less aggregate money because it's people who are retired who have more to lose.
Sure.
So those are a couple of the big ones.
You host an online safety checkup. You mentioned you've got the checklist of 22 things. You also offer an online safety assessment. If you could leave our audience with just one or two immediate habits they should change to get safer online, what would it be?
They're all important because it sounds like saying what's more important, your back door, your front door, your
I
side
know.
door, but I will give you a couple. Okay, so I really cannot emphasize enough that you should be using a password manager. 95% of cybersecurity professionals use them, and 70% of us use one password, and another 25% use Bitwarden, according to the latest data I've seen.
Mhm.
And that's for good reason. I particularly recommend that lay people use one password
Okay.
and use it to create and store their passwords and where they're logging into, so that if you get a fake, like you get a link to Amazon.com, but it's not really Amazon.com and you can't spot it with your naked eye, one password will tell you it's not the site registered with that they're recognizing. So it makes you double check. I think where we're best off is where we get when we get flags to tell us double check this.
Yeah.
The other thing
Okay.
is never click on any link, period. Period. If you're getting a link from your bank, just change channels is what I would leave your audience with. Change the channel. If you get an email or a text telling you there's something going on with your bank, leave the email or the text and go to what you know is their actual website and log in and take it from there. You get a phone call from somebody claiming to be the IRS or American Express or Microsoft tech support or whatever. Say, great. What is your name? What's your department number? Find out who they are. Usually, if you start asking a bunch of questions and they're scammer, they're going to hang up. But they might give you some information. But then hang up, call back in. 99% of the time, it wasn't really them.
Mhm.
And then the third thing is just please turn on multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication on everything, including your email. A lot of people might turn it on their bank, but they forget to turn it on the email, which is where they can reset the password for their bank
Yeah.
account. So please turn it on everywhere it's offered. Microsoft itself looked at all of these hacks into Microsoft accounts, and 99.9% of them did not have MFA turned on, which means that almost all of them would have been prevented had they turned MFA on. Don't kick yourself later for not having turned it on. Turn it on now so you can prevent the breach that would cost you $20,699 on average
Or more.
or more. Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned your checklist.
Mhm.
Where can our listeners go to find that checklist, learn more about your work, your books, your podcast?
Well, if you go to smarteronlinesafety.com, I offer an assessment that you can take.
Okay.
If you want to do that, there's a nominal fee for that just to help us fund the creation of it and the prevention, but that gives you a scorecard on all 22 areas. Like I said, you're already doing a lot of them. So what you want to do is find out where are your gaps, where are the holes where hackers and more importantly, where their bots and agents and automations can get in, and then secure those. Go to the red zone first and secure that. And you can also learn about my book, Digital Self-Defense in an AI World, which walks you through all 22 steps and how to fix it. I also offer workshops, and as you said, I host the Smarter Online Safety podcast and show, and I interview people and we talk about these things and doing them and what not to do. And I just really want to educate people. If I could go back and not have had the attack happen to me, I would do it again because of what it's allowed me to do. I've been so blessed to be able to help over 1 million people on 7 continents. And my goal on the wall before I die is 100 million people. I really
Mhm.
want this to be a movement of people becoming self-empowered for self-protection so that they are not a sitting duck for bad guys with powerful tools like AI. You don't have to be one of them. I want you to get to safer ground.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the really important takeaways is even if you think you're fine, you might not be because as you shared in your story in the beginning, it was a couple of years before you realized that this was going on.
Correct. There were some things that went missing or things that were off, but you kind of just chalk those up to you did something wrong or there was a glitch. And then all of a sudden, when you lose everything, then in hindsight, you go, "Oh, that's what that was. Oh, that's what that was."
Yeah.
And I don't want you to find out the hard way that there there's nothing the people you're gonna turn to can help you with at that point, like law enforcement, and I don't want you to be stuck.
Jocelyn, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. This was really great.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's been a real, real pleasure being with you.
For Cybercrime Radio, I'm Heather Engel. For more of our media, visit our website at cybersecurityventures.com.